What if the greatest queen in English history was hiding a secret so explosive it could have toppled her throne, shattered her dynasty, and rewritten the story of an entire nation? For over 400 years, Queen Elizabeth I has rested beneath the cold stone floor of Westminster Abbey, her coffin sealed, her body untouched, her secrets, supposedly, buried with her forever. No one has ever been allowed to open that tomb. No government, no scientist, no historian. The Church, the Crown, and Parliament have all quietly agreed on one thing. Whatever lies inside that coffin should stay there. But here is what they did not count on. Science does not need to open a coffin anymore. A shadowy team of geneticists and artificial intelligence engineers working under a classified initiative they called the Tudor Genome Project claims to have done the impossible. Without disturbing a single stone in Westminster Abbey, they say they have virtually reconstructed the complete DNA of Queen Elizabeth I. Their original mission was straightforward enough: solve the mystery of her bizarre and terrifying final illness. But when their AI began processing the data, it uncovered something far more disturbing: a biological anomaly buried deep in her genetic code. A secret so profound it does not just challenge what we know about Elizabeth. It threatens to demolish the very foundation of the Tudor dynasty itself. And before we reveal exactly what the AI discovered, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell, because once the secret comes to light, history will never be the same. The first problem was obvious. You cannot just walk into Westminster Abbey with a shovel and dig up a queen. Exhuming a monarch of Elizabeth's stature would require an act of Parliament, the personal consent of the reigning monarch, approval from the Church of England, and the willingness to face a firestorm of public outrage. In short, it was never going to happen. Every serious geneticist had written off the idea of ever studying Elizabeth's biology. Her DNA was considered permanently inaccessible. But this team saw an opportunity where others saw a dead end. They called their artificial intelligence system Argus, after the hundred-eyed giant of Greek mythology. And they brought Argus to bear on a problem that no human lab could solve alone. For 5 years, the team traveled quietly across Europe, visiting private collections, royal archives, and museum vaults. They were not looking for bones or teeth. They were hunting for something far more subtle: microscopic biological traces left behind on personal artifacts that Elizabeth had touched, worn, or sealed with her own hands during her lifetime. They narrowed their search to 3 extraordinary items. The first was the famous Chequers ring, a gold locket ring that Elizabeth reportedly wore every single day of her reign. When opened, it reveals 2 miniature portraits, one believed to be Elizabeth herself, and the other widely identified as her mother, Anne Boleyn. The ring's interior still held traces of what the team believed to be a tiny lock of hair. The second artifact was a pair of Elizabeth's ceremonial gloves, preserved in remarkable condition, with skin cells still embedded in the centuries-old fabric. And the third was a state letter to the King of France, sealed with wax that Elizabeth herself had pressed with her own thumb. Individually, the DNA fragments recovered from these artifacts were a disaster: 4 centuries of degradation, contamination from hundreds of handlers, exposure to light, air, and moisture. Any conventional lab would have declared the samples useless. But Argus was not a conventional lab. The AI's first task was filtration. It cross-referenced the damaged fragments against verified genetic profiles from Elizabeth's known bloodline, including the confirmed mitochondrial DNA from the Richard III Identification Project at the University of Leicester. one of the most celebrated forensic genetics breakthroughs in history. After processing billions of data points, Argus reached a staggering conclusion. With 99% certainty, the biological material from the hair, the skin cells, and a single epithelial cell trapped in the wax seal all belonged to the same individual, a woman directly linked to both the Tudor and Boleyn family lines. They had found her. What came next was even more extraordinary. Using a technique the team called genetic temporal modeling, Argus treated the fragmented DNA like a shattered ancient manuscript. By comparing Elizabeth's fragments against tens of thousands of sequenced 16th century European genomes drawn from archaeological databases across the continent, the AI learned what DNA should look like for a woman of that exact time, place, and ancestry. Then, piece by piece, chromosome by chromosome, it began filling in the gaps. The result was a fully reconstructed virtual genome of Queen Elizabeth I, a complete genetic instruction manual for a woman who drew her last breath in 1603. It was, the team claimed, the most detailed genetic portrait ever assembled of a historical figure without direct access to their remains. And what they found buried inside that genome would send shockwaves through the world of history and genetics alike. But before we get to the truly explosive discovery, the AI first tackled the mystery it was originally designed to solve: the terrifying question of how, exactly, the most powerful woman in England died. Elizabeth's final weeks in March of 1603 were unlike anything her court had ever witnessed. After the deaths of her closest companions, including her beloved cousin and lady-in-waiting, Catherine Carey, Countess of Nottingham, and the traumatic execution of Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, the Queen fell into what her physician described as a settled and unremovable melancholy. She stopped eating. She barely slept. She whispered of ghostly visions and spirits haunting her chambers. But the physical symptoms were even more alarming. She refused to lie down in her bed. For nearly 15 hours, she stood upright in her bedchamber, unsupported, before finally collapsing onto cushions her terrified ladies-in-waiting had spread across the floor. She lay there, speechless, for 4 agonizing days. She would hold her finger to her mouth or point at it desperately, as if trying to communicate some unbearable pain, but she could not speak. Her coronation ring, which she had worn for 45 years as a symbol of her marriage to England, had to be sawed off her swollen finger. Witnesses took it as an omen of death. For centuries, historians blamed one thing: the Venetian ceruse. This was the iconic white lead makeup Elizabeth famously painted onto her face, sometimes reportedly layered an inch thick, to hide the devastating scars left by her near-fatal bout of smallpox in 1562. The ceruse was a lethal cocktail of white lead and vinegar. It corroded the skin underneath, which meant she had to apply even more to cover the new damage. It caused her hair to fall out, which is why she wore those famous red wigs. It rotted her teeth until by the end she had almost none left. It was a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle of poison. The AI confirmed all of this and then went further. Argus identified genetic markers suggesting Elizabeth was unusually susceptible to heavy metal accumulation. Her body, the simulation predicted, simply could not flush the lead efficiently. Her liver would have been scarred, shrunken, and barely functional by her late 60s. But here is the critical finding that changed everything. The lead poisoning, Argus determined, could not account for all of her symptoms. Not the extreme muscle rigidity, not the inability to lie down, not the burning, searing pain in her mouth that left her pointing at it in silent agony. Something else was at work, and when the AI ran a full toxicological simulation, against her virtual body, testing thousands of known poisons, it found a match that was absolutely chilling. The AI identified traces consistent with a sophisticated two-compound poison. The first was aconitine, derived from wolfsbane. The second was atropine, derived from belladonna, or deadly nightshade. This was not a crude poison like arsenic that any court physician might detect. This was an assassin's cocktail, subtle, brilliant, and diabolical. In the simulation, small doses of belladonna would have caused fever, flushed skin, confusion, and delirium, symptoms that perfectly mimicked natural illness in an aging woman. Meanwhile, the wolfsbane worked silently on the nervous system. It would have begun as a burning, tingling pain in the mouth, which explains why Elizabeth kept desperately pointing at her mouth but could not articulate what was wrong. Then came the agonizing muscle stiffness and nerve pain that would have made lying down unbearable. Standing or sitting propped up on cushions was the only relief. And finally, over days, the poison would have slowly shut down her respiratory system. According to the model, Elizabeth did not die peacefully in her sleep. She was slowly suffocated, potentially fully conscious but unable to speak, by a poison so refined that no physician in 1603 would have known what to look for. The AI cannot name a killer, but the list of suspects is chillingly short. Foreign agents from Spain or the Vatican, still furious over the defeat of the Armada and England's break from Rome. Possible. But the data and the political circumstances point closer to home. James VI of Scotland, the presumptive heir, was growing impatient. And then there is the most unsettling suspect of all, Sir Robert Cecil, Elizabeth's own Secretary of State, the son of her most trusted advisor. Historical records confirm that Cecil had already been secretly corresponding with James for years, carefully arranging a seamless transfer of power. Did he see an aging, grieving, increasingly unpredictable queen as a threat to the stability he had worked so hard to engineer? It is a question that the AI raises but cannot definitively answer. But everything, the symptoms, the timing, the political circumstances, fits with disturbing precision. But the potential assassination was not the most explosive finding. Not even close. As the AI continued to analyze Elizabeth's reconstructed genome, it stumbled onto something that redefines her entire life story. The biggest mystery of Elizabeth's reign has always been right there in her famous title, the Virgin Queen. For 44 years on the throne, she never married. She never produced an heir. She transformed her single status into a political weapon and a near-religious mythology, presenting herself as Gloriana, as Astrea, as a divine virgin goddess wedded only to her nation. She played the marriage game with devastating skill. Philip II of Spain, her former brother-in-law, wanted to marry her to drag England back to Catholicism. Francis, Duke of Anjou, the French prince she playfully called her frog, courted her for years, and Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, her childhood friend, and the great love of her life, waited in hope for decades. But she never said yes to any of them. Historians have always explained this as a masterclass in statecraft. By remaining single, she kept England free from foreign domination. By dangling the possibility of marriage, she could manipulate rival powers against each other. But the AI analysis suggests this was not purely a political calculation. It may have been a biological necessity. According to the report, Argus flagged a cluster of rare genetic mutations on Elizabeth's X chromosome. These markers, the team claims, are consistent with a condition known today as androgen insensitivity syndrome, or AIS, In this condition, a person who is genetically male, carrying one X and one Y chromosome, develops physically as female because the body cannot respond to male hormones. Individuals with AIS look female, identify as female, live as female, but they do not have a uterus and cannot bear children. If the AI model is accurate, then Elizabeth's entire identity as the Virgin Queen was not simply a brilliant political strategy. It was an elaborate, lifelong act of survival. In the 16th century, the single most important duty of any monarch, and especially a female monarch, was to produce a legitimate heir to secure the dynasty. If Elizabeth's secret had ever been exposed, it would not have merely embarrassed her. It would have destroyed her instantly. Her enemies, particularly Mary Queen of Scots, who had a healthy son in James, would have declared Elizabeth a monster, an abomination, unfit to rule. Civil war would have erupted. Her reign would have been over. So Elizabeth and her innermost circle of advisors, men like her spy master, Sir Francis Walsingham, and her chief minister, William Cecil, constructed a new identity for her. If she could not be a mother, she would become a myth. She turned her biological impossibility into her greatest political asset. Think about her most famous speech, delivered to her troops at Tilbury as the Spanish Armada approached in 1588. "I know I have the body but of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too." Many who support this theory believe she was telling a literal hidden truth about herself in that moment, and consider her obsessive control over her image. The thick white mask of lead paint was not merely about hiding smallpox scars. The AI report notes that Elizabeth's famously elongated, elegant fingers, visible in every portrait, are a recognized physical marker associated with this exact condition. The makeup was not vanity, it was armor, a way to erase any visible sign of biological difference and present a flawless, untouchable, carefully constructed icon to the world. This alone would be enough to rewrite history, but the AI was not finished. Its final and most devastating discovery had nothing to do with Elizabeth's condition. It was about her blood. Specifically, whose blood actually ran through her veins. To verify Elizabeth's place in the Tudor dynasty, the team instructed Argus to analyze both her maternal and paternal genetic lines. On her mother's side, the results were unambiguous. The mitochondrial DNA, which passes unchanged from mother to daughter through the generations, was a perfect match for the Boleyn family. There is zero doubt that Elizabeth was the biological daughter of Anne Boleyn. The bombshell landed on her father's side. The geneticists compared Elizabeth's reconstructed genome against established Y chromosome markers from the Plantagenet and Tudor male lines. These markers were available thanks to the groundbreaking identification of Richard III's skeleton, discovered beneath a Leicester parking lot in 2012. That project had already revealed a shocking Y chromosome mismatch in the royal line, a discovery that the research team published in Nature Communications, and that raised uncomfortable questions about false paternity somewhere in the chain of English kings. The Tudor Genome Project's finding was even more dramatic. According to the AI simulation, Elizabeth's paternal DNA did not match the expected Tudor Y chromosome profile at all. Let that sink in for a moment. If this data is accurate, it means that King Henry VIII, the man who tore England apart to secure a male heir, who broke with the Catholic Church, dissolved the monasteries, married 6 wives, and had Elizabeth's own mother beheaded on charges of infidelity, was not Elizabeth's biological father. The implications are staggering. It would mean that the greatest monarch of the Tudor age, the woman who gave her name to an entire era of English civilization, had no legitimate claim to the throne whatsoever. By the laws of her own time, she was a usurper. And it would mean that Henry's charges against Anne Boleyn, which history has long dismissed as politically motivated fabrications, may have contained a kernel of devastating truth. Did Elizabeth know? It is entirely possible. She spent her entire childhood as a political castaway, declared illegitimate at the age of 2 when her father had her mother arrested and executed at the Tower of London. She clawed her way back into the line of succession through sheer intelligence, willpower, and survival instinct. Many historians have marveled at her relentless drive, her iron self-discipline, her pathological need to control every aspect of her public image. This theory offers a chilling explanation. She was not just fighting external enemies. She was running from a secret that, if exposed, would have meant her immediate arrest and almost certain execution. The AI report cannot identify her biological father, but it notes that the paternal DNA markers show a strong correlation with noble families in Anne Boleyn's inner circle. The 2 leading candidates are men who history has long whispered about. The first is Henry Percy, 6th Earl of Northumberland, the man Anne Boleyn was passionately in love with before Henry VIII forced them apart. The second is Mark Smeaton, a court musician and one of the 5 men arrested alongside Anne and executed on charges of adultery with the Queen. Historians have always assumed Smeaton was an innocent man, tortured into a false confession. But this AI data raises the haunting possibility that his confession, the one he never recanted, even on the scaffold, might have been true all along. We need to be clear about what this is and what it is not. This is a simulation. It is not a body on a slab. It is an extraordinarily sophisticated prediction built from real DNA fragments, real historical artifacts, and the most advanced artificial intelligence ever applied to a genetic puzzle. Some of these conclusions may be confirmed. Others may be challenged or overturned as technology evolves. But what is undeniable is this: every major finding aligns with the historical record in ways that are deeply unsettling. The lead poisoning explains the makeup, the hair loss, and the decaying teeth. The genetic condition explains the refusal to marry, the obsessive image control, and the construction of the Virgin Queen mythology. The paternity question explains her childhood of terror, her paranoid secrecy, and her relentless need to prove herself worthy of a crown that, by blood, may never have been hers. And the assassination theory explains the bizarre, agonizing final days that no historian has ever been able to fully account for. Elizabeth I was not just a great queen. If even a fraction of this is true, she was perhaps the most extraordinary survivor in the history of the English-speaking world. A woman fighting her own biology, her own bloodline, her own court, and possibly a hidden assassin, all while building one of the most glorious reigns any nation has ever known. She could never let anyone get close enough to discover the truth. She lived her entire life behind a mask, both literal and figurative, and she took every one of these secrets to her grave beneath the stones of Westminster Abbey. Until now, the AI has spoken. And history may never look the same again. If this video changed the way you see history, smash that like button, share it with someone who loves a royal mystery, and subscribe so you never miss what we uncover next.